Thank you so much, everybody, for jumping on. This morning's live will be covering part 10 of our AMH series, so I will dive straight into the questions. So the first question I have for you, Dr. Rusty, is what is the people's opinion about the AMH test?
People's opinion about AMH is very polarized. On one side, you have people who says AMH is a rubbish test, it should never be used, and you should not believe in AMH results. You shouldn't do AMH at all. Yeah. So on the other side, you have got the people who believe AMH is everything. It gives all the solutions you need for fertility. It gives you all the answers for your fertility problems. Tells everything about why you're not conceiving if you're trying to conceive. So it's people believe it's magic test, and everyone should do AMH, and it gives you solution. Then you have got another group of people like me in the middle. So try to explain, yes, AMH test is amazing test. It should be used by everyone who wants to have a child now or in the future. But the purpose of AMH test is different depending on what you're trying to achieve in terms of your fertility journey. And it explains how you should interpret AMH. You should not over-interpret AMH. You should not under-interpret AMH. This is one of the purposes of doing this live stream series on AMH, to explain, demystify AMH test, and explain the role of AMH.
Thank you, Dr. Rusty. Could you please explain why the AMH test is so controversial?
So the reason AMH test is controversial is, first, is AMH is a central hormone of female reproduction. Like we said previously, if you imagine female reproduction is orchestra, AMH is a conductor. So it plays most important role, which means you cannot ignore AMH as a molecule itself, as a role in terms of role of in fertility, and you cannot ignore AMH test, which is a test which measures how much AMH you have in your blood, as a tool for managing fertility. You cannot simply ignore. So, but the problem is there's very little understanding in the public, and even among healthcare professionals, even among scientists who work in the field of fertility, in terms of understanding of a female reproduction properly in terms of egg reserve or follicle recruitment. Second is a role of AMH in determining egg reserve or controlling the egg reserve. Third is a AMH test itself, the properties of AMH test, and application of AMH test for the different for different purposes. So we just jumbled up everything. We already know about the female fertility AMH and AMH test. That's all we know, and we're just tangling up everything. So female fertility can mean different things to different people. For example, when someone is not trying to conceive but want to have a child in the future, in 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, fertility means very different thing to them compared to other women who's actually actively starting to conceive, and compared to other women who have been trying to conceive, who did not have a successful pregnancy, which means they have infertility, compared to other group of women who are doing fertility treatment using IVF. So these are very, very different group of women, and they have very different purposes. And AMH plays central role in terms of determining their fertility and fertility management, but application is very different. You apply AMH tests in women who are trying to conceive in future, which is for future fertility screening and monitoring or fertility preservation, very differently to someone who's actually doing IVF. So without understanding, actually we're talking about different purpose of use of AMH, we cannot understand the role of AMH. That's why when we don't understand something, it's too complex, even for scientists, even for specialists, even for the public or patients, then we just ignore, saying, oh, some people are saying AMH doesn't play any role, but actually I used AMH for my IVF treatment. Or some say, AMH it tells everything about my fertility. I have low AMH, I got pregnant, and this is why you should ignore low AMH. So this is all entangled. So we need to disentangle and put everything in its place so that people can understand AMH as a molecule, AMH test, and application of the test. One of the purposes of this live stream was to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Asti. And could you please explain why you have different opinions on the AMH test compared to other specialists in the industry?
I have very, very, very different background in terms of understanding of AMH tests. Just due to pure luck, I got involved in both science of AMH, actually as a molecule itself, science of AMH tests, properties of AMH tests, application of AMH tests as a scientist, as a researcher, and also application of AMH tests as a clinician, fertility specialist. So I have been working with AMH for last 16 years. So just due to pure luck, I got into the program as a clinical fellow program in Manchester University IVF department in 2009. So then we decided to do a series of research studies on AMH test and application of AMH in understanding fertility of women and application of AMH in IVF. So then I decided to do MD to study all of this. This is in conjunction of biomedicine, medical side of AMH test and application of AMH test itself in fertility in IVF. As a part of my MD, I did 5 years of research and got my MD back in 2014. So from 2010 to 2015, I was working as a clinician, as clinical fellow, and applying AMH tests to patients undergoing fertility treatment in IVF in Manchester. And I was doing research and modeling, which is statistical modeling, by best statistician in the world in IVF or reproductive medicine modeling. So, and for 5 years we did the modeling of AMH, and I worked under one of the best clinicians in Manchester called Cheryl Fitzgerald as her trainee applying AMH tests. And we did a lot of discoveries, and we did a series of publications, and we changed a lot of practice in terms of application of AMH tests during those 5-year period. And then as a scientist, I had to do a lot of modeling to understand properties of AMH tests. Then I understood actually this test is poorly understood by whole public, including scientists and specialists and fertility in the fertility clinics. It's being applied, but in a very small proportion of population who's undergoing IVF treatment or fertility treatment. Application should be much wider. And ever since I've been telling like a scientific community in conferences, in publications, encouraging people to understand and use. And one of the reasons of doing this live streams and TikTok and Instagram to go directly to the public so that they start understanding role of AMH and use for their own fertility, because it can save a lot of stress. If you know your egg reserve and if you can predict in the future, you can save yourself from a lot of stress in the future. So yeah, and overall my understanding of AMH is very different because I got very extensive scientific and clinical background, and actually I've done MD on AMH. So if you look at my MD thesis, the title is application of AMH in assisted reproduction. As a part, we did a full-scale investigation and study of this test. This is why my opinion about AMH is different compared to other people, clinicians, maybe even scientists, because I worked in the conjunction of science and clinical application of AMH in understanding of fertility.
Thank you, Dr. Asti. That was really interesting hearing your background in research of AMH. My final question for the live this morning is, could you please tell us how the AMH test should be used in your opinion?
Okay, so like we said, AMH test, in order to use the AMH test, we need to understand the test itself. Yeah? So what test does is it measures AMH molecule in the blood. So AMH molecule is produced in females only by growing follicles which contains egg. So AMH in the blood tells us that some ovarian activity going on, ovaries recruiting follicles, and preparing follicles for ovulation. So this is called antral follicles. If you see AMH, and that means that over is recruiting follicles. And also AMH or recruited follicles are a reflection of how much of egg reserve left in the ovaries, which means it can predict how long you will be producing follicles, which we call this ovarian fertility. So which means by just simply doing AMH, first you can tell how much of ovarian activity going on, which means how many follicles are getting recruited today. So, and which means that whether you have a lot of follicles on your ovaries, so high antral follicles, medium level of antral follicles on your ovaries, or low level of antral follicles. If AMH is low, that means very little follicle recruitment is going on. And also you can predict future fertility. That's why you can use for fertility screening. So AMH should be used for all women who are planning to have a child in the future, or trying to conceive now, or doing fertility treatment. So, but the purpose and interpretation is very different. If someone wants to have a child in the future, they need to do AMH to establish their baseline egg reserve, and also to tell how long they will be producing eggs for. So it doesn't give exact year when you run out of egg reserve, but it gives you a very good idea how long you will stay fertile in terms of your egg reserve. If your AMH is very low, when let us say your age is 30, your AMH is 3, then that means you have a short period of time left before you either complete your family by having kids earlier, or you preserve your fertility by freezing eggs or embryos. That's for women who want to have a child in the future. So then also it's important for women who are planning to start trying to conceive. So they decided, okay, so now we with a partner, we will start trying to conceive. If they need the IMH for fertility management, because they need to know whether they are ovulating. If they have very high AMH and having period every 3-4 months, that indicates they're not ovulating. They have a PCOS, very likely. Then also if they have very low AMH, they should not try for a long period of time, because it may be like they have such a low egg reserve left, and they may run out of egg reserve soon, which means they can try for short period of time, maybe 3 months, 6 months, depending on the AMH levels and other fertility parameters. If not successful, they should seek fertility treatment earlier. So, and then third group of women who have an infertility, they try to conceive for a year, they didn't have a success, then they also should do AMH to understand what's good fertility treatment for them. Whether they should do IVF, whether they should do ovulation induction or IUI. So IMH can give a suggestion in terms of what's the right treatment, provided it's interpreted by clinician who actually has a good experience on interpretation of AMH or egg reserve. So then for patients undergoing IVF, the role is very different. Again, so it establishes egg reserve, and it helps us to decide which protocol should be used, and which ovarian stimulation drugs should be used, and which dose of ovarian stimulation you need to use to have a good number of eggs without increasing risk of OHSS, or increasing risk of having poor ovarian response. So trying to get optimal number of eggs. So AMH should be used in all women interested in fertility, but application is very different, interpretation is very different. So if you go through all these 5 parts, we did the 10 parts of AMH live stream on TikTok and Instagram. So if you go through number 1, today is number 10, so you have a very full good understanding. And as an even patient or member of public, you can tell what's actually what application AMH has got for you, because everyone's fertility is unique. Like I said, there's like fingerprint. There aren't any 2 people who have an exact same fertility. So because everyone's egg reserve is different, egg quality is different, their overall impact of their overall health to their fertility is different, fertility purpose is different, fertility timing is different. So everyone's fertility is unique, and they need to understand their own fertility by doing AMH tests, for example, and they should be able to interpret what AMH or antral follicle count or pelvic ultrasound scan what role these investigations play in their understanding of their fertility so that they can plan their own fertility. Fertility planning doesn't mean fertility treatment. It doesn't mean IVF. Fertility planning means just simply understanding your baseline fertility, how long egg reserve you have left, and what should be your strategies to achieve your goals. Your fertility goal may be having 3 children, or having one child after 5 years, or having 5 children starting after 5 years from now. So everyone has different purposes. For that, you need to understand your body, and without understanding your egg reserve, you cannot understand your fertility. So you have very little on, because everyone's fertility is different, everyone's egg reserve is different. To understand your own egg reserve, you need to do AMH and antral follicle count, maybe twice, because like we said, there's some variation, 30% variation in the results.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asti. That does conclude our live stream for this morning, and also does conclude part 10 in the AMH series. As always, the screen recording of this live will be published on Dr. Asti's YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And like Dr. Asti mentioned, this was part 10. So we do have quite a lot of recordings of our series published on Dr. Asti's social media, which do provide a lot of value and education on the topic of AMH in the fertility space. So please jump on the page to watch those videos if you would like to learn more. We'll be taking a short break from lives, and we'll be resuming on Monday, the 5th of August. So we will see you then for our live streams. Thank you so much, Dr. Asti.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks everyone for joining.